Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irene. I'm the host here, and my guest today is Charan Sachar. Hi, Charan.
Hi.
Well, I'll tell you honestly, when I looked through your Facebook page, your Instagram page, I sort of had hard time deciding where to start with you because like the first comment that I saw was like, is there anything that you can't do? And
There's a
that's the
lot I
hard
cannot do.
part, right? Because like you do so many different things. So
Right.
basically, like right now, your main thing is pottery, but you started as a software engineer.
Mhm.
Tell me, like, what made you quit software engineering, like working at it for 12 years, and then suddenly, like, one day you wake up and you say, enough is enough, let me do pottery full time. Like, what was that decision like?
Uh, it was a tough decision, but it also wasn't like an overnight decision I made. I started my full-time job as a software engineer, and it was actually around the same time when I started taking classes in pottery and learning, different techniques. And within a year or two of doing that, I also started selling some of my work. And so it was always considered to be like a hobby on the side that I do over the weekends or in the evenings. And there was never a plan of, oh, I'm going to one day quit my full-time job and do my pottery full time. So it continued on. And then the last 4 years that I was at my job, I got more serious. There were galleries that were approaching me to carry my work. And I always had the excuse that, well, I have a full-time job. I cannot
Right.
produce that much. And then I wanted to apply for some fine art shows, but schedule required me to take days off from work. So that was getting a little tough. And I was getting really stressed at work. I wasn't enjoying it as much as when I started it. And like I used to dream about software code when I had started with my job, but then I realized my dreams had switched and I was dreaming about making mugs and teapots and things like that. And I felt something had to change. So 2011 is then when I finally quit the job and went into the pottery business full time.
Well, before we go into details about like what exactly you make now, so you were stressed at work back then, right? So you
Mhm,
went to work for yourself. Is it
mhm.
ever stressful for you now?
Oh yeah, it's always stressful. I think there are two kinds of stress. There is the good stress and the bad stress. And I think the bad stress is when you are generally not enjoying what you're doing and you still have to do it. And so that's adds like a whole different level of stress. But even if you're enjoying what you're doing, then the stress is like, well, it needs to create certain amount of income. Can I have a source of living out of it? So that creates a different kind of stress. But at the same time, you're so passionate about what you're working. So that kind of changes it into a good stress that, well, at least you're willing to work hard enough for it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I've read in New York Times that there is an article mentioning you that now you have, instead of one job, you have like at least four different jobs. It was an accountant, a sales director, marketing manager, shipping clerk. Are
uh,
any of those things that you like, you wish somebody else did for you while you can concentrate exclusively on creating?
Uh, Definitely. The one thing, so that article came out in 2011 when I was still trying to do everything by myself. And very soon around that time itself, I figured that I need to get some other people to help me out. And shipping was one of them. I do like creating my work. I make everything by myself from start to finish. But once the pieces are out of the kiln and they're fired and I finish them off and it's all done, I feel my work is done. And especially when, there is an order and even the sale is done. So I've done the marketing part, which I like doing. I like doing all those different aspects. But when it comes to finally just packing the thing and sending it off, that's the part I find very hard to do. And so I had hired an assistant for many years since then, all the way up to August of 2019. I've always had an assistant off and on. People stay for a year, some have stayed for 4 years. But I've always had somebody come in. But like maybe come in like once or twice a week, and it was mostly to clean the studio and ship orders. Those are the two things I used to get people for. All the clay work and everything I did myself.
Right.
So they used to come in for 2, 3 hours and help out, and that was really a good relief. But since 2019, then the pandemic hit, and then I was like, well, it's hard to get somebody right now. Then I started managing things by myself. So right now I'm doing everything by myself again, and I still wish I had an assistant, but we'll see.
Right. Well, before we talk about pottery, because your
Mhm.
pottery is influenced by different fiber arts, like it's influenced by quilting, it's influenced by embroidery, by knitting. So there's all these different textures that you put on your pottery. Tell me your fiber journey, like how did that start? When did you start playing this fiber?
Uh, Fiber journey has been very in and out of my life during my early stages. Like when I was back in India, my mom, she used to run a boutique and design clothes for brides. And my mom's side of the family works in, the bridal, Indian bridal business. So I've been seeing fabrics and embroideries all my life, plus, going to Indian weddings and enjoying that part of it is a lot of fun. So I've always enjoyed that, but I never actually worked with the craft. I just like the look of it. And so when I even started with ceramics, it was like on a very unconscious level that, I was bringing those textures and patterns in. And it was only when I started working full time in ceramics, I realized very quickly how much hard the work is. Like I'm on my feet all the time. I'm making pots, for 8 to 9 hours every day. And I was just talking to a customer at a show, and I said, I cannot take clay to my living room and sit on the couch and do it because it's messy. I can't like watch television and do it. And she's the one who suggested, why don't you take up knitting? And I was like, I had no clue what knitting was about. I was like, isn't knitting like making knots? And she's like, no, 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 you you're good enough that you can Google it and watch some videos and watch it. And that's what I did. I had some jute twine at home and I had chopsticks, and I swatched and I made a square um, coaster or whatever you call it. And I was like, okay, I guess I can knit. And then I went and I told my friend, and she's like, you need knitting needles. Stop using chopsticks for making your
So
swatches.
how did your equipment for knitting change since then?
Oh, it changed very quickly after that, like, getting better needles, of course. My first stop was, the first thought which came to mind where to buy yarn and needles was, the big box stores like Joann's. Went there, purchased the stuff, and then friends started asking me, I found Ravelry, and I'm like, where are people getting all these amazing hand-dyed yarns? And people keep talking about these different brand of needles. I don't see any of those in my local stores. They're like, well, there are specified yarn stores and things like that. And then I started finding about those and, got access to better needles and, better yarns, quality yarns. And I really enjoyed working with that. And then even I think 2 years or something into knitting as such, I acquired a knitting machine at a garage sale. And that was, a regular flatbed, mid-gauge plastic one. And I was so fascinated by it that I have now 5 knitting machines. Um, 3 of them are completely functional and I use them off and on. But the other two, it's like I've kept them. I can fix them right away, but I don't have room for them.
Right.
So, you
Well,
know,
besides when you came to that yarn store, right, and you saw all the variety of yarn,
mm.
then you at some point you decide that that's not interesting enough of a yarn for you and you need to create your own yarn. How did that happen?
uh, uh, my spinning story is kind of weird. It wasn't that I didn't like the yarns that I was getting. I actually was liking all the commercial yarns a lot, and even the hand-dyed yarns that I was collecting them a lot. And you know how our stashes increase. I can see your stash behind you. It just keeps grows and grows. And I was wondering how to use it up faster so I could either buy more. And somebody mentioned like weaving takes up a lot of yarn. So I actually my first step was convincing my wife that I need a floor loom so that I can use up all this yarn. And it took almost a year to find the loom that I wanted, which would kind of fit in the living space. And I got the loom, and I went to a men's knitting retreat like a week after getting the loom. And I was, very proud of telling everyone, like, I got a loom, I can use up all the yarns I have. And when I left, the organizer out there, Michael Kelson, he sent me home with the traditional Ashford spinning wheel. And he's like, now that you have a loom, you need to be making your own yarn. And I was like, I don't want to spin. I was like completely against it. I said, it's taken me a year to get room in my living space for a floor loom. I don't have space for a spinning wheel. Plus, I don't want to spin. The whole reason of getting the loom was using up my yarn. I don't see the point of making my own yarn now. And the wheel actually sat in my van for almost 2, 3 weeks, and I didn't even bring it out. And a friend of mine convinced me, like, the wheel is there. Why don't you just try some? So he gave me some fiber, and it was like love at first draft, as you say. It's like you just start spinning, and I'm like, yes, I want to do more of this.
Well, I mean, you
So,
coming up with such beautiful textures when you spin yarn because, like,
mhm.
I mean, I'm addicted to yarn. I love all yarn. I don't think I ever met yarn that I didn't love, but yours is like stops me in my tracks and like I have to like look and enlarge and see close. You know, how do you come up with the ideas for that yarn? Like, what gives you the inspiration to try something, some different textures?
Um, I think for me it is experimentation is what it starts with. I'm kind of a person who gets interested in doing complex things and sometimes even doing simple things in a more complex way. I think it's that engineer
Right.
mind that I have that I need to problem solve. So if I see a flower or a caterpillar or something, and I'm like, can that be made in yarn? And it'll be like, okay, so then I'll experiment a lot. I'll experiment with, already produced novelty yarn and add that into my spinning to see if I can create that texture. Or I can, get some sequences and see, well, will that add the sparkle that I need? Then it's like, well, it's not the right colors. So can I make an art bat? Can I dye wool to get the certain color so that I can make an art bat with certain textures? Can I add silk in it for speckling? And so it's that part. It's like whatever I see, like again, my influence comes from, my background of watching Indian movies and the clothing and the color schemes. And I go like, okay, can I make a yarn that represents one of my favorite songs, for example? And then it is like trying to extract those elements and creating a yarn just to reflect that.
Well, I saw you posting some wool that you dyed, and you were like, every time I look at it, I want to start dancing. Like, do you
Yeah.
ever do that? Do you actually?
Yeah. I love to dance. The one highlight for me, Indian weddings, is the dance and music that goes on with it. And I'm from the northern part of India, Mumbai, but my parents are from ancestors are from Punjab, and Punjabi weddings are known for the singing and dancing. Like people all over the country almost like to attend Punjabi weddings because they're so much fun. It's like a big party over a week.
Right.
Every event is followed by dance and music. So that I miss that part of my life to do it, more often. If I was in India, here, there's very little community where we get to do that. But no, I enjoy in my own space. And when I make a yarn, I feel like dancing about, I dance about it.
Well, when I look at your pottery, I mean, the pottery is dancing. Like each piece has a lot of movement to it. It's, I mean, you have some of the dancing divas there, but you also
Mm.
have like dancing teapots and like all of that is, it looks like it's alive. Like even those little pillows that you make, they look like they're
Mm.
about to fly, like something from Aladdin.
Yeah.
Um, when you knit, how discipline are you with the knitting? Like, do you ever follow a pattern?
It is experimentation, a lot of it. It's um like I will rarely like purchase the yarn suggested by a pattern. I don't think that has ever happened. It's usually what I have in stash. And like I can kind of look at a pattern and go like, okay, I really like this. I would like to knit it. It looks complex enough, will keep my interest enough, and or it has certain amount of rest rows that I can knit with ease. And then I get to experiment with like, well, what if I add my own yarns, something from my stash? Do I add scrap yarn? Do I add some hand spun yarn? What can I add a little extra to it just so that it's more fun for me? That's what my baseline is. It's not like I want to create something unique that isn't out there anymore. I think everything has been done before, but it's just that so that I don't get bored doing it. Like currently I'm knitting a sock. I do self-striping socks a lot, but I'm like, okay, let's just do some slip stitches and elongated stitches and just make it a little bit more fun because this is my third sock this summer. And I'm like, I'm doing all of them in plain stock in it. I would like to do something different. So that's how I experiment.
Well, besides doing pottery full time, right, as a job, as the main income, and spinning yarn, you teach classes. You also open YouTube channel. Like, what made you start a YouTube channel?
The YouTube channel I've had for a while, like when I even started with ceramics, I just had it, but I wasn't posting that often. And then it was mostly the pandemic. I was missing, the company of people sitting around and spinning and chatting and knitting and doing those kinds of activities. So it was, starting YouTube lives and Facebook live videos where I can actually interact with people while I work. So initially, it was honestly just about killing the boredom of, just sitting at home and just talking to yourself and doing the things. And I like to share my process. I'm a very process-oriented person. I like the process of making things, and I get very excited when I figure an easier way or an efficient way, or might be a very complex way, but to achieve something that I want. And just sharing it through videos and classes and teaching possibilities, it's just gives me more opportunity to learn because I think the more I talk about things, the more I feel they need to make sense. So I
Right.
need to dive into them further. So it kind of feeds off each other. So the YouTube channel has been great for, just meeting up with people and sharing my work.
Well, do you remember the first class that you taught?
My first class would be a clay workshop that I taught probably in 2011, so 10, 11 years back. It
Were you
was
nervous coming as a teacher into the class?
I was nervous, but the thing is, it's like even as a growing up, as a kid, like I was always fond of teaching. Like I loved maths and physics. These were my favorite subjects. Like I remember teaching my cousins at that time, and like everyone was stuck on anything, they would always come to me and they're like, you can explain things properly.
Right.
So I had that level of comfort. The thing when I remember teaching my first clay workshop was it was a 2-day workshop. First day was we were kind of going to make all the pieces in partial stages, and the next day I would finish them up and then do surface decoration on them. So it was just planning as to how much I can fit into a schedule was a little bit nerve-wracking in the beginning. And then also because it was a hands-on workshop, because the students would also be working. So I don't was like, will they want to make all the pieces I'm making, or would they stick to one piece? Like, I don't want to restrict anyone. I said, no, you all make just one piece. We don't have time for you to make everything, but I'll demo everything. So that was a little nerve-wracking, but it's amazing how things flow. And after that, they have called me around 4 times to teach at that college. And so many of them have taken that same workshop multiple times because they just learn something new every time.
Do you ever learn something from your students?
Yes, always, always learn something. And sometimes it's not directly what they tell me, it's sometimes the questions they ask. It's like I said, it's like the process of answering and explaining what I'm doing helps me understand things better. And sometimes it's as simple as, the materials they're using. Like, if I'm talking about core spinning and they'll be like, hey, I've used, sewing thread for a core, and I'm like, can you use that? And I'll try it, and it'll be like, yeah, you can use that. So there is something that don't even occur to me because of the materials I have. But then somebody will mention something, and or will just ask me, hey, can I use this instead of this? And I'll be like, well, let's try it. So that way I do learn a lot from students.
Do you think you changed like as a teacher, as an instructor now in comparison to when you first started?
I think I did, but again, like my it's been more than 2 years that I actually did an actual in-person teaching schedule. So what has changed about currently is like I've done a few online things for teaching. So that has changed where how many cameras do I want on me, what camera angles to do, and even doing my live video feeds, that the technical part of teaching has changed a little bit, but what I talk about and how I explain, like I think I follow the same process. I don't know if things have changed that way. Um, because I don't like restrict myself from, explaining things. I don't like, well, I can't tell this to anyone because it's top secret. I don't have anything like that when I'm teaching. So that way I'm just like, no, this is the process, this is how you do it. I might add in more things what I've learned throughout, but my actual process of teaching, I think, is pretty much open and the same.
Right.
Yeah.
I interviewed the Canadian artist Carol Milne, and she
Mhm.
makes these little sculptures out of glass and like knitting sculptures. So they would be
Yes.
like a few stitches and like needles that
Right.
she makes out of glass that like look like knitting. When you put knitting on the surfaces, like you feel like because you're a knitter now, because you know how to knit, it changed how your art looks.
Uh, yes, it has. And like I told you, when I started with ceramics, my work was a lot influenced by the fabrics and embroideries that I saw in my mom's shop. And only when I started knitting, it was the first time I was making my own fabric. Like previously, it was just seeing and getting inspired. But this time it was like, well, no, I made those stitches. I made that piece of fabric. And I felt that, okay, I need to see how I can incorporate that. So it started with just the plain stockinette stitch. And then it kind of became like I like to challenge myself just to learn things new. So for, I don't know, it's been 8 or 9 years back that I introduced the knit pattern. And then after that, it has been every year a challenge. Like I try to create a new texture every year. So I did garter stitch, I've done hand spun, I've done cables, I've done lace. Like every year it's like a new challenge as to like how can I, you know, make something new, which is knitting related or anything fiber related. If I'm spinning, how can it be spinning related? And I introduce it in mugs so that, people can get a collection of new fiber art related mugs. So yeah.
Well, I saw you like you working on the improvisational quilt also. How do you divide your day? Like describe me your day because like there is just so much I'm hearing, right? There is knitting, there is spinning, there is workshops, there's like actual pottery, and not to manage the marketing and all these things. Like How do you find time
Mhm.
to like experiment with new fiber arts?
Um, it's really, I like I said, I'm a very process person. If a process or something is interesting to me, I want to try it. And I'm the kind of person who, if I find something new, I really dive down deep in it. I will learn whatever I can, whether it's, getting books from the library. If it's a book I really fall in love with that I need to follow it, I'll purchase the book. If I see there are workshops being offered, I'll take workshops. Like whatever possible to learn a craft, I will do it. So typical day for me is like I I have priorities as to what needs to get done. The work in the clay studio, which is, just a few steps below. I don't have to travel anywhere. It's all in home. So my clay studio is downstairs. There is no fiber that enters that space, except now that I dye fiber. So I do have to clear up the space. I do the dyeing out there as well. But I get stuff done with clay. Now, the thing working with clay, especially the way I work, I don't work for like 8 hours straight in the clay studio. And the way I work is, you prep the clay, then it needs to dry a little bit till it's ready for the next stage. And then it needs to dry till the next day till I can like add handles to it or add buttons to my mugs. So there is a lot of wait time involved with clay. And I like to work efficiently and no matter what I do. So with the clay, it's like, okay, today just prep up all the slabs, put the textures on all of them, and then while they are stiffening up, I have almost like half the day, like I have 6, 7 hours in between.
Right.
So that becomes a good break from the clay studio for me to either spin or knit or do some quilting. And all these other hobbies which I have, the fiber arts, they are not very much time dependent. Like, with clay, I need to follow the schedule of the clay, how soon it is drying. Like, yeah, I can cover things up and delay some things, but there is a certain time limit within which it has to be done. But with all these other hobbies, they are good time fillers in between that I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can, spin a little bit while I'm waiting for something else. So I'm always doing something. I'm never like sitting around like even television, I cannot watch, just look at the TV screen. I need something in my hands. So things get done eventually.
Well, when I'm knitting, like there are days when I can knit when I'm like really loving the project that I'm working on. I can find myself knitting like 5, 6 hours at a
Mhm.
stretch. And then I regret that because my hands start complaining.
Yeah.
So you telling me that you like never sit and do nothing with your hands, like do you take care of your hands? Like do you ever feel like you should take a break? Are you ever forced to take a break?
I am, but then the difference is I'm not just knitting for 5, 6 hours straight. I'm probably knitting for an hour or so, and then I'm spinning for an hour or so. Then I'm working in the clay studio for maybe 2 hours. I'm just doing different things, and at that I think that just provides different ways for my hands to work. So it's holding your hands in different ways for different crafts. When I'm quilting, it's using my hands in a completely different way, using the sewing machine, which I had never done before. Using the rotary blade. It again uses a different part of my body, different hand movements. So I don't exercise my hands consciously, like, oh, I shouldn't get tired, I shouldn't do it for so long. It's like my attention span is like, it's not even attention span. Like if I get interested, I'll keep knitting for, 2 hours straight. But but then my next thing that I pick up, even though I'm still working with my hands, it's something completely different. So it just uses my hands differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you use your pottery to sell, basically.
Mhm.
What happens to your knitting and your quilts?
My knitting is mostly for personal use. I do land up like I love knitting shawls. I love knitting Stephen West shawls because they are kind of like that nice mix of, complexity and beautiful colors you can add in and play around with even scrap yarns and things. But then I don't wear shawls. My wife doesn't wear much shawls. So it's like Well, I give them away. And but I've even knit samples for some of my friends for, they have a yarn dyeing business. So I'm like, hey, I I want to really knit the shawl, but I don't want to buy the yarn. I don't want to even keep the shawl. If you want a shop sample, I'll gladly knit it for you. I just want to knit it. So some of my knitting is kind of done like that. We'll trade in with some things, and then I again I cannot always connect selling whatever I make, because then it adds a different stress to everything. Like I can't be like spinning and I'm like, okay, this needs to make money, otherwise there's no point doing it. So I'm not thinking so much as that, but like if I'm spinning, I'm making these yarns and they get into weaving projects. The quilting, I started only like seriously quilting like a little more than a year back. So my quilts are collecting. Like three, four of our quilts are actually in use at home. So those are being used, but then there are others which are more like wall hangings. And there are few places that have approached me to, show them in their gallery space and everything. So I'm kind of considering that, but I have no idea right now how to price them because it's a new medium. The material cost is different, the amount of time I spend with them is different. Like I can't relate it. Like I'm familiar with clay, it's a medium I've known for so many years. With this, I'm kind of like, well, I don't know how to price it. Like I've spent like hours and hours on it. I can't put an hourly rate on it and do it, because then it's like people are like, how much do you want for that? So I'm not I'm not doing it for the purpose of, selling it as such, but it would be a good opportunity too as well, because I do enjoy doing it. And then, yeah, if there is somebody who's interested, I'm willing to sell them, but I'm just kind of like dabbling in them right now. And I'm enjoying the process. That's what basic line is.
Well, I often joke that like my yarn collecting is a completely separate hobby from my actual knitting.
Mhm.
You have so many hobbies, right? What's that stash situation looks like for each hobby? How do you find place for all of them? Because quilting takes fabrics and all of that stuff. The knitting,
Right,
spinning, it's all like different kinds of stashing.
right. It's I like to keep a very organized studio space. I'm talking from my fiber and office studio space right now, and I have dyed fiber that, it has been dyed by other fiber dyers, and like I like beautiful braids. I'll keep them so they have their dedicated bin. And then because I like making art yarns, so I need to make art bats. So I'll keep, art bat materials like silk noils and sari silk and things like that in a separate bin. But it's all kind of categorized. So I know, like, if I want to do that, I can just pull that out and use it. All my undyed fiber, which I want to dye myself, that I keep in the garage, because I'm like, there's no point looking at white fiber in my studio because there's still something that needs to be done to it. So I know what it looks like. It's white. So there are certain things I want keep in close proximity. I keep all my bins are clear so I can see by first view that what's there in it and what I need. So I kind of like to organize things that way. Even now, when it comes to collecting thread for, sewing and stuff, or even fabrics, I like working with a lot of scrap fabric for my quilts, improv quilts. So it's all categorized by color in one drawer. And I think for me, the thing is like once that particular bin is completely full, there is no room for it. Either use that up before getting more, or figure something else out, or make some room somewhere else, or get rid of stuff which you're not going to use. So I kind of contain it by the amount of space I have rather than, but sometimes it gets carried over too. Yeah, I'm not very strict about it, but my wife says I amazingly kind of keep making room in the same amount of space over and over again. And she's like, there is no room left here. And I said, no, if I look enough hard, I'll find some place.
Well, when you at the festivals, like when you sell there or when you just visit, like is it difficult for you not to like to be organized with your purchases, to be like mindful that like I have this project in mind, so for that I'm gonna buy yarn, but I'm not gonna buy this yarn just because I like the color or the texture of it. Like how disciplined you.
I've not, I've very rarely purchased yarn and stuff for a project. I really go with my gut feel as to I like it. I love the colors, or I love the base it's on. I've never knit with that, or the fiber. I've never spun with something like that. And so I really go with color and something that speaks to me. And sometimes occasionally, because like the way I've organized my fiber at home, before going to a festival, I will have a look at what I already have. I'm very fond of warm colors like fall colors, oranges, reds, and things like that. And usually when I go, I do land up purchasing a lot of it. And but then like recently I finished a big sweater spin in which I used up all the blue and purple fiber that I had in my stash. And I was headed to fly away, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be buying more fiber. What should I get? And I said, before I buy all the oranges and reds again, let me see. And my bins are just filled with oranges and reds. There's no other color other than that left. And I'm like, why don't I spin with this? Because I just love the color so much. I love buying braids of it, but I really don't spin a whole lot with them because I just find them. I said, oh, I don't want it to get over or something. And then I'll end up getting more. So I was very conscious about, okay, don't get any reds and oranges. So I did get 70% of, again, cool colors, but there were still a little bit of reds and oranges that got sneaked in. I just can't do so. Sometimes people see me and they're like, I've got your colorway. And I'm like, yep, that's me. I just buy it. Yeah.
It's funny because when I was interviewing Steven West, he actually told me that whenever he's at the yarn festival, he'll always like think about like what he would use for certain project, but then he ends up buying yellow yarn just because like this is his favorite
Yeah, it's
color. And he ends up with like he's like, I don't even know why I'm thinking about it and why I'm like looking
yeah.
for so long, and because I end up with yellow color anyway.
Yeah, and there are people who, who are very good about like seeing a yarn and they're like, well, because I mostly knit shawls, I'll need at least two skeins of it, so I'll get two skeins. I cannot even think that far ahead. I kind of will be like, no, I need one skein. One skein of this is good, one skein. And I'll get that. Whenever I look at a project, I like shopping from my stash because it restricts things and it pushes me to be more creative as to what I can do with it. Because yes, it's very easy for me to go out and be like, or go on online and be like, yeah, I need five colors. I like these five skeins, buy the five skeins. It kind of kills the joy for me at some point because it becomes very predictable too,
Right.
because I know exactly what it's going to be. I kind of like to experiment with what I have with me. I'll throw some handspun yarn in there, so it'll be very unexpected. So it's those kinds of things which kind of excite me. So I like to shop from my stash. So then
Well, I
when I
mean, is it
buy,
like
I'm not thinking project wise. Yeah.
is there's this like chicken and the egg kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
Does yarn gives you ideas for projects, or do projects sort of like you go shopping, you see the project and then like, okay, let me find the proper yarn for it? Like what excites you first? Like what gets the ideas going?
Uh, from yeah, I guess it's that same chicken and egg problem, like you said. It's like I both of them excite me equally. I will buy yarn with no project in mind. I will see projects online and I'll be like, okay, I need to knit something like that. I'll get the project and with no idea what yarn I'm going to use for it. But I will always feel like, well, there's something I can figure out. But uh, it's like if I'm doing something like a sweater, you know, then I'll be more conscious about, okay, how many sweaters do I have in with all colors already? It'll be like, okay, I don't have any purple sweaters, so let's focus on buying some purple yarn for it. So there are sometimes there is a conscious effort of doing that, but most of the time it is just with the gut. And if the yarn speaks to you, get the yarn. If the pattern speaks to you, get the pattern. And hopefully they will all get together, because both of them have been brought into your life because you love them, and there's something you loved about it. So there's no harm going with that gut feeling at all times.
One of the pictures I saw on your Facebook group was like bunch of leads for some containers that all came out warped and you had to toss them all into the trash. How do you
Uh,
deal with disappointment in life? How do you deal with when things don't go according to plan? Like whether it's in knitting or in pottery, like how do you find the energy to pick yourself up and start again?
I I think clay has kind of taught me that, because when I started with clay, everything was precious. Like even a single mug with a crack was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I have to make that again. And this is when I was just starting off as a hobby. You're so attached to everything that you do. And also clay is breakable, so it breaks eventually somehow. Sometimes it's just like everything is perfect. You're taking it out of the kiln and it's perfect, and just showing it to a friend and saying that, see what I made. And by the time you pass it on, it slips from your hand and breaks. And it's like it can happen so instantly that that really hardens you that, okay, it's all temporary. And plus, I've also come to realize that if I had skills to do it once, I can do it again. And every time I have done that, it's usually a more improved version, because you have got more skills, things have gotten better. So there is always room for improvement there. So there is never a thing that, oh, it's lost, now what? No, it's more like a learning experience. I said, well, next time be careful that your lids don't warp, or that your pieces don't crack, don't dry things faster. But it never becomes like such a, like clay. What happens with hand building, especially if you dry things too fast, they will crack.
Yeah.
And I have to be conscious, like just because a show is coming up, I cannot speed up these things. And I try sometimes because I'm on a time crunch, but the clay will teach you that no, you cannot fool around with me like that. And so it always brings you back that, take your time, enjoy the process. So even if things fail, even with knitting and spinning, like if I've knit something and I've used the wrong colors, you can always undo it and redo it again, or over tie the whole thing at the
Right.
end of it, with something. So
Well, I mean, when I show people the lace that I need, they often say, "Oh, I wish I had that patience." And I'm laughing because like I don't consider myself a patient person at all. Like if anything, like I'm people that know me would think that I'm very impatient. And I feel like knitting lace sort of forces you to be patient with it because you keep like, one slip stitch and suddenly they're all running into different directions,
mhm.
screaming from each other and you can't catch them. Do you feel like pottery teaches you patience, or do you feel like you're a patient person to start with?
No, the pottery, I think, definitely has taught me a lot of patience. And like I said, you kind of have to wait till the clay is ready for the next step. So you just have to wait. And because I'm involved with so many other hobbies, it's easy for me to just do something else in between. And people have said that to me about that as well, that, oh, you're so patient, or, you really can dive into something and take your time doing it. I'm like, yes, but at the same time, I think that's the thing with Instagram and stuff. Like you post a picture of something complex you have done, and it seems like you spent 24 hours a day just doing that. I said, no, I've spent a month doing that with just 1 hour every day. So it's like I might not be that patient. Like I'll do it for a while. I get bored with it. I get tired with it. I move on to something else. And then I do that. And then at the end, you see 10 different things that are done. That doesn't mean I'm patient. It's just that I'm switching between things more often.
So, like people that know you forever, right? Like your family members, your friends who know
Mhm.
you as the programmer, as the software engineer, are they surprised that suddenly you this full-blown full-time artist?
Yeah, the like my mom's sister, she follows me on social media, and every time she speaks to my mom, she's like, "What does he keep doing? Now he's knitting, and then now he's spinning." And that day I saw him sewing on a machine because she used to sew a lot on the machine. And like when I was in India, I didn't use a sewing machine only till like a few years back. She's like, "Where does this all come from? Who is he learning all this from?" So they get very curious as to what I'm going to do next, or they'll just follow me for the fun of it and go like, "I can't believe he's doing this now." And I'm like, yeah, fine. And they ask me sometimes when I speak to them too as to, "I saw you're doing that, but why?" And I'm like, just because I like doing it. There is no
Oh,
other
do you
reason.
ever regret quitting software engineering and going into this full time?
Not really. There was a little bit of a time during the pandemic when I thought that everyone is working from home, like when I couldn't do the shows and things. I'm like, if I still had that software job, I would be still working and doing. But then it very soon it was like I was still working at home. And then, I was still selling my pottery. I was still doing all the things I wanted to do. And I was like, I would still hate being stuck on my desk doing programming. I said it wouldn't change. Like, it just gave me that small glimpse of like, well, if I was still working, I would still have that job and would be just sitting here. I said, but that's what I hated about the job. I'm like, I really don't want to do that.
Right.
So it was only for a brief moment I thought about it and I said, no, don't want to be there again. So,
Do you have any like piece of pottery that you would never part with that like means so much to you, something like your heirloom piece?
uh, there are pieces, but interestingly enough, probably they are not made by me even. They are, made by potters who have been mentors of mine or, whose work I've collected. Um, some of my work, maybe, but there is no particular piece. Like, especially with my work, I'm like pretty okay with like everything going somewhere. Um, I think it has come with distance, but there are some pieces which are special to me. Like my first time when I did anagama wood firing. This was back in 2002. It was, spend like a whole week stroking a kiln, cutting the wood, and the whole ash develops on the surface of the piece, which actually makes the glaze. It's so hard to duplicate anything like that. And it's not like, a very grand piece or anything. It just has so many memories attached to it that it makes it special. So yeah, those are the pieces I wouldn't want to. And in that same firing, my instructor at that time had one of her pieces, which it's a small cup, which she put in the firing, which she really liked, I really liked, and she just gave it to me. So it's those kinds of things I would just keep with me because it has memories attached to them.
Right. Like, can you picture yourself, let's say, another 12 years from now? Is like, are you gonna still do the same thing?
I don't know. Uh, I think earlier I used to have not essentially a vision or something, but I at least I think maybe it's going through the pandemic or something. It has kind of changed. Like, well, stop thinking about what's going to happen even next week, because when I remember the pandemic started, we were just like, okay, it's going to be 2 3 weeks of this.
Right.
One show got canceled, we'll be back and running, and such a long time passed. So making those plans is one thing. Like I can have a vision, like I can see certain things in a way, but I'm not like actively planning certain things to do it. I For me, the most important part is that what I'm doing, the process of doing it, that is what is enjoyable to me. If I'm not liking doing certain things and I'm getting forced to do it over and over again, I know they will eventually just fade out because I'm going to figure out ways of not taking out time for them.
Right.
So it's things like that. I kind of like the way naturally, like when I started doing pottery, there was no plans of, making it a full-time profession. When I started knitting, I didn't take up knitting so that I could put it on my pots. I took up knitting because I wanted a craft I could do while watching television. And how that knitting came into my pots, there was no plans of spinning. There was no plans of so many things, but they kind of just entered my life and they turned into things. Like if you ask me 5 years from now, did you think you would be quilting? Did you think you'll be spinning? Like all those things, I would be like, no, there's no way. Like, why would I ever want to quilt? Why, like, I've never sat on a sewing machine. I don't know anything about it. But now I'm really interested. I'm interested in making my own clothes. I've never done that before, so I don't know.
Well, you mentioned that you enjoyed the marketing part of it. Is
Mhm.
there ever a situation when you create something and you think this will definitely sell? Like this is one of the best things I ever made, and there is no interest in it.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's always something like that. It's like I'll have this, grand idea that okay, this is what I made, and then and it's not like a big strategy I have about marketing or anything, but I'll just kind of know that okay, this connects well on so many different levels to what I'm doing, to what I've created, and people will really, understand this and all. And then sometimes it's as simple as like the social media algorithms are so messed up that nobody's even seeing the post. And I'm like, I did everything right. What went wrong? So you just kind of never know what works, what doesn't work. But I it it doesn't it disheartens you for a little bit because you had all your hopes stuck on it. But then at the same time, if the product is out there, it's there, eventually it'll get noticed, or maybe it won't. And sometimes, like I've introduced several different every year, like I said, I introduce a new texture pattern for mugs. Some have done extremely well that I'm still making them over and over again. And some of them have just like after the first few shows, I sold out of them, but then I wasn't getting repeat orders for it. Nobody was asking for them again, even though there's a listing of it on my website. So I'm like, okay, time to, stop making them, which is also kind of nice sometimes because then it gives you more space to do other things rather than I have like 7, 8 different mug patterns. I don't want to be doing all of them all the time. So it helps to recycle stuff that way too.
Do you ever get time when you out of ideas of what to do, what to create next?
No, no, there's always something. In fact, there is always too many things, and it's more like the other issue as to I have so many things on my plate. What do I do next? Because I sometimes get overwhelmed with all the things that I want to do. So I have the opposite problem. There's never an issue of what to do. The question is the same, what to do next. But it's not because I don't have anything to do. It's because I have so many things to do. I don't know which one to choose.
Well, honestly,
And
I can't wait to see what else you're gonna create because I love all the stuff that you make. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I'm so glad that you agreed to talk to me today. I really enjoyed getting to know you today.
oh, thank you so much for having me on this chat because I have I do what I like to do, and I'm glad I could share all the things that I have done in the past, and I look forward to doing more new things in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Charan. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you.